All right, today we're talking with Army Veteran Andrew Rosado, founder of Woodlawn Press Winery. You and your wife Bonnie are the founders. So before we get to talking about this, it was a really cool concept. What you guys are doing, you don't actually grow your own grapes. You buy the juice, bring it in, and then you take it from there and turn it into wine. So really looking forward to hearing about that. But first, we want to hear about what you did in the Army.
Yep. Yeah. Thanks for having me on. And to kind of share my experience. But yeah, so I was Army officer from 2009. I commissioned and then got out 2013. But funny enough, probably a year before I got out, that's where I started my winemaking hobby. Um, uh, and I got into it actually through my wife's cousin who opened up their winery up in Washington County, PA, Pennsylvania,
Uh-huh.
about 10 years ago. So yeah, so the year before I transitioned out, I just happened to pick up this hobby and it kind of snowballed from there. But before all of the winery stuff, 2013 came and I transitioned out of the Army. Um, and honestly, I had no plans. Well, the only plan I honestly had was to finish my master's degree program, um, which at the time I was gonna finish that and then convert over to that profession, that career field.
Mhm.
Um, Honestly, I kind of got bored at the same time, so I just ended up applying to jobs. And I like to call it my transition job because for basically the next 6 years, I worked uh, in and outside of the government, both as a federal employee and as a government contractor.
Mhm.
Um, and that's where it kind of started, just my experience. Um, and and into that transition, I kind of want to highlight too, like, um, I guess it's okay not to know what you want to do, just to kind of keep moving forward.
Yeah.
And honestly, that's what I had my sights for, is just to keep doing something. So, anyways, I started just applying to different jobs. I ended up being a federal contractor working for the Defense Intelligence Agency as a contractor at their headquarters here, Bowling Air Force Base. Um, Surprisingly, I was doing event management. So, I had my operations background in the Army. They thought it was a good fit, let alone I had the right clearance at the time. So it was kind of fitting. And I like to tell people that that was a good transition point for me because I was a civilian working in a military environment. And there I picked up a lot of good experiences, definitely working with new people, learning and adjusting to new things on the spot, on the fly, and learning how to deal with that. Um, and then later I transitioned more into what I was doing for the rest of that 6 years, which I ended up becoming a federal employee for the Transportation Security Administration headquarters, TSA headquarters,
Mhm.
up here at Pentagon City. So there, I spent like 4, maybe 5 years over there, and I was doing training. So I was in training development and professional development over there. Um, Again, I thought at the time that I was just going to get a 9 to 5 job. It was steady. Me and my wife had just had our first daughter, or our first kid, and I was just kind of living the life. Well, that wasn't the case, right? So I kept going to work, doing projects, but honestly, it came to a point where a lot of things were predictable, and there wasn't a lot of creative outlets, and you were still restricted to certain things, and it just wasn't too exciting, right?
Huh.
Um, and through all these years too, I kept doing the winemaking hobby in the background.
Mhm.
um and it kind of just snowballed and like I said, into what it is. And honestly, we had thought about opening up a winery, I don't know, maybe 4 or 5 years prior to us actually doing it. And it finally came to the point where it's like, we just need to stop hoping for the best time to do it,
Mhm.
stop over analyzing it and planning it so much that we just need to do it. Um, and Funny enough, right before I left the TSA headquarters, I ended up taking a training manager job as a contractor again, knowing that I would at some point we were going to start this business. But that was kind of a strategic move, just because we were trying to get some income as well. So a lot of moving parts as we wanted to endeavor in this project of ours. So we just said, let's stop all of that. We're going to start our LLC, start our business plan, look into commercial spacing, look into distribution for grapes and juice that we're using, and then we kind of went from there. But let me go back. Like this took me 6 years, to to finally understand that and appreciate that and kind of know what I wanted to do.
Uh-huh.
And it came to a point where we finally uh, started the business, and just being an entrepreneur itself, it helped me understand that, at least for me personally, that I appreciated like having somewhat of control in there and doing what I wanted to do and how I wanted to do it.
Right.
And just having a winery was the means for all that. um so yeah, so it definitely helped me as far as my mindset was concerned, was that this was the right time, the right opportunity, the right thing for me to do. 2018 timeframe, quit the job, or no, sorry, it was early 2019, quit the job, and then we actually opened up our winery 2019, July of 2019. However, we just celebrated our 2-year anniversary, and about a little over a year and a half has been in COVID. So we haven't had a quote unquote traditional year yet. We're still working through that, but I gotta say, with our community base so far, and given the hard work that me and my wife have put into it, we've survived thus far, essentially.
Yeah.
So yeah,
Are you making most of your money off people that come into the winery, or wine sales externally?
yeah. So for right now, it's mostly internally. We're working on distribution right now, and it's kind of funny because we were pushing for distribution right before COVID started, so we kind
Yeah.
of had a halt.
Because
Um,
liquor sales are like way up in COVID. Like
yeah,
regular liquor stores and stuff are like doing great during COVID. But if you
exactly.
require people to come into your place, that's a different story.
Exactly. No, you're absolutely right. So, from when we opened until COVID hit, it was all basically in-store tastings, people sampling and buying bottles. Um, and then during COVID, it was kind of the same thing. However, when COVID started, we again, something that the military teaches is just to adapt. So what happened? We had to close, right? So we had to close the tasting room for about 3 months. And literally overnight, we had to create an online store so people could order for curbside pickup, or we were doing local deliveries.
Yeah.
So that's what we were literally doing for
An
3 months.
instant pivot, right?
Exactly, exactly. So yeah, we were yeah, it was late nights, a couple of those early nights when we, or before COVID, or right as COVID started, where we were fixing the website, and obviously there's issues with launching everything, not collecting money right, not getting addresses right, not getting names right, so we didn't know who we were going to.
Huh.
But yeah, so but just pivoting with it, and then we were doing deliveries for about the first 3 months straight, almost every day. And then as COVID, or at least in here in Virginia, restrictions started being lifted a little bit. So we had some walk-in hours, some reservations, which we moved to reservations only because we have a limited capacity, and that helped us to have the social distancing amongst customers. So,
Mhm.
just kind of pivoting through that whole time, and seeing what works and what doesn't. But like I mentioned, a year and a half into, for the whole business, is in the age of COVID. So now everything is almost back to normal, but not, because we're now, now we're going to the fall and winter, and there's some
Yeah.
variants going on. So again, we're keeping our eyes out, because again, we may have to pivot again, whether we're doing more deliveries or having to go out more to people, whether it be farmers markets or out to the
Mhm.
consumer itself. But yeah, so everything, about 75% is we're doing in-house, and we started doing some local festivals, which is helping out. But distribution is next on the board.
All right. Well,
Yep.
Andrew, we're going to take a quick break. We'll be right back. All right, back talking with Army Veteran Andrew Rosado. So go back to when you first started up the Woodlawn Press Winery and
Yeah.
talk about the concept of, well, first of all, you're a micro winery and you also are kind of unique in that you don't produce your own grapes. You're buying the grape juice from somewhere else and then taking it from there. So talk a little bit about some of your startup struggles and what it's like being a micro winery.
Yep. So since we are a micro winery, well, we kind of dub ourselves that just because of the size and output of volume of what we're producing. We essentially just work with the distributor who sources all the grapes and juice for us out of state, from the West Coast, mostly California. And then we get the juice here and start fermenting in the back in our stainless steel tanks. I will say, thankfully, through my wife's cousin, who have their winery up in Pennsylvania, that we leveraged them a lot as far as their model and how they were sourcing and how they were doing it. And then we just kind of made it our own up here in Northern Virginia. Thankfully through them, we got to see best practices, and I got to skip some of the lessons learned, at least from that part.
Mm-hmm.
But for the business aspect of when we actually opened here, um, there was a lot of some lessons learned, especially with like intellectual property. For example, when we a couple of weeks right before we were about to open, we did our research and Google searches and all that stuff. At one point we got a nasty gram, to say it lightly, from a business about, I don't know, 15, 20 miles radius from here, that basically said that we had to change our name and potentially our logo because it interfered with theirs, and there'd potentially be some intellectual property damage there, essentially. It was that or go to court. So, what was the quick fix after talking with them, getting a couple lawyers? We thought we had did our due diligence and all that. It was kind of a gray area, so the fastest way to get our doors open and start making money, because at that point, we're on the clock, because we're making wine, we're paying for rent for our commercial space, so time's of the essence. What we had to do is just pivot real quick. So we literally had to change our name overnight. So we went with Woodlawn, which is a geographical name here. So we went more with a geographical name because it's right next to Mount Vernon, historical Mount Vernon estate, and then next to it is the Woodlawn historic house in the Woodlawn area. So that was just a quick fix for us that still was in line with of our identity. Because before that, it was more of a Virginia name, a general name. So
Mm-hmm.
that's just one quick lesson of what we had to learn. Yeah. So it was kind of a shock in the face when we got that nasty grant. But again, being patient with yourself and not trying to freak out and just and not understand it's the end of the world, but you just got to move in a different direction. So, and when we kicked off our store, or the winery itself, one of those things we had to learn right off the bat was social media, and the presence of it, and just having a good hold of what you need to do for social media.
Right.
We really had none. We that was a quick lesson learned. We realized we needed to do, and honestly, we just kind of hoped, we're like, okay, we'll open our doors and people are gonna spread the word out for us. Some new news articles are gonna come out. That wasn't the case. Everyone is on social media, advertising, spreading the word. And that is one thing we had to do real fast, was to create a business page, and honestly, we didn't have a website to begin with either. So people can find us, let alone find us on Google Maps or Apple Maps, whatever it is. So that, like I said, we just had no idea. We just was more concerned, and so had our vision tunneled into opening our business, that all that side stuff, which isn't side stuff, it's absolutely important for your business, needed to happen. And we just kind of skipped over that and just went directly to our sales and our tasting room. But that was definitely a lesson learned in all of that. But let me go back. So as I got out of the Army, and I know, some people are like you mentioned in the beginning, they're either transitioning out or about to transition out. Um, in the Army, I'm not sure if it's the same now. We had a mandatory, I think, 40-hour transition classes, I guess you would call it. That they kind of set you up to get your resume ready. They actually brought in Department of Labor to talk to us about jobs and everything, and gave you a lot of tools and resources. And we did mock interviews and all this stuff, and to actually convert in military terms from what you did to civilian terms, uh, to put on your resume. Well, like I mentioned, um, it was good and bad, like, right? Because in my head, I knew that I was just going to get out and finish my master's. So, I was kind of like, it was kind of one ear and out the other with some of it.
Mhm.
But I will say that, after doing my own research, there were some organizations out there like Department of Labor had some decent stuff where I could reference later when I actually started looking for a job. Um, I will say that I hope it's gotten better, because my experience, it was just very cookie cutter, and especially being in a room with everyone who had mixed experiences in the Army. It just wasn't the same. It wasn't really relatable. Well, to some people, I should say. But not only that, just going through the difficulty, especially me, of converting into words what I did, and transitioning over to civilian terminology.
Yeah.
That was probably another reason why I delayed trying to find a job in the first place, and another reason why I just wanted to complete my master's. But I'll say that, so my wife is a federal government employee as well. Thankfully, if I didn't have her, I probably wouldn't be able to, get some of the jobs I did, because she was actually the one who was able to kind of filter all that military jargon and then convert it over to a resume. So I will say, in that regard, that was probably one of the tougher uh, parts of my transition. Was just trying to get um, all of that, all of what you do uh, on paper, into something that civilians can understand, because sometimes it doesn't relate directly, but especially if you're a leader, whether you're an officer, a senior leader, senior NCO, whatever it may be, you still have those leadership experiences. And honestly, what you hear now today is the soft skill kind of experiences that people want and need.
Yep.
Um, for example, like my wife's going through some interviews right now where she's uh, um, interviewing some positions that they have open on the agency she's working with now, and they're looking just for good people, so soft skill stuff. And honestly, that's a lot of the good things that I could put on my resume that was easily understood by civilians. So
Yeah.
I will say that was pretty tough for me. But like I said, as I kind of went through that 6 year gap, I should say, between the military and when we opened up the winery, that definitely gave me an idea of those experiences of what I liked and what I didn't like.
Mhm.
Whether it's like having that predictable atmosphere, versus being, for me, having more control, more creativity, and just kind of doing what I want to do and how I want to do it, essentially. So
Yeah. And we talk about soft skills a lot on the show in regards to transition. Soft skills are hard to put on a resume. In
yep.
many, you can say leadership is a great soft skill, but
Yeah.
how do you back that up in civilian terms? And
Yeah.
sometimes when you water your resume down so much to civilianize it, it totally it totally castrates your resume for everything you did in the military.
Exactly.
So it's tough. And actually, we're gonna. I'm making a little bit of a pivot with the podcast over time to focus more on job hunting and job skills and not just entrepreneurship, because less than 5% of veterans get out and go into business for themselves, whereas
Right.
95% of the rest of us, enter the job market or school in some
Yeah.
way. So definitely talk about, try
Yeah.
to address some of those issues. And you said, well, maybe the transition process has changed. No, I don't think it has. Camp,
Yeah,
camp and all that
yeah,
stuff. And
yeah,
Soldier for Life and Marine for
yeah,
Life. And they
yeah.
threw a lot more money at it, but I don't really think it's changed a whole lot. So
I gotcha.
yeah.
But no, but that's a good point because like for those 6 years, like uh I didn't know I wanted to be an entrepreneur. Like it literally took me that long.
Mm-hmm.
And you know that's not to say like so I work in or I was working in the Northern Virginia area. So there's government agencies everywhere. There's also a lot of veterans working in those agencies.
Mm-hmm.
And that just happened to be my experience. But I know a lot of veterans who love what they're doing, you know, and they're working for XYZ agency, whatever it may be, and they're having a great time because they transitioned almost directly into what they were doing or wanted to do on the civilian side. However, with back to me, it just so happened that I kind of went that route, especially with the operations and training route, which I was doing in the Army. And it just wasn't my fit, you know, like, and it kind of, I go back to, you know, I just wanted to kind of do things my way, just being more creative, and kind of reaching out more to the community, which is another aspect of our business that we wanted to pursue. But yeah, so yeah, that's why I say that because especially being here in the Northern Virginia area, and we're so close to Fort Belvoir that I see all like more than half of our customers are veterans or military. You know,
Yeah.
I see them in their job too. So, but that's a good point that you know, there's definitely those individuals who love what they're doing, still supporting the mission, just on the civilian side. So
Yeah. So I have a wine question. It's in direct regards to how you make your wine. You don't grow your own grapes. You buy the grapes and the grape juice and have it brought to you, and then you go from there. So how much of a good quality wine is the grapes versus the processing of the grapes?
yeah, so I've had debates and heard debates about that. I think it's primarily the harvest, the grape itself, right? So
Mhm.
where he's sourcing it from. And so thankfully, like I mentioned, like working with my wife's cousin up in Pennsylvania, you know, they kind of did the hard part for us where they got to see what wasn't great and what wasn't. So we were able to get that fast. However, um, we kind of make things our own, right? So what you see with different wineries is you kind of naturally ferment. So you basically get everything and it just starts doing its job, converting that sugar into alcohol. What we do is use special yeast strains, excuse me, kind of like breweries.
Mhm.
You know, they'll use special yeast strains for their grain and their mash. Well, we kind of do the same thing, except it's wine yeast. So we have special ones for our reds, for our whites, and for our fruity stuff. So
Mhm.
that there is kind of our twist into things where it makes it a little bit more unique, especially if we're looking for specific flavor profiles. And then I gotta say too, we actually did get into something new and neat this past year. We did our first Virginia apple wine, and we actually aged that in bourbon barrels. So, you know, barrels essentially give it another characteristic, but we again put our twist on it because I didn't want it to be a just flat kind of apple wine. I wanted to have a twist. So we found some bourbon barrels, and that really kind of did the job for us.
Yeah. So talk a little bit about where you're at right now. I mean, I know you out of your 2 years of being in business, a year and a half of it have been in the middle of COVID. So hopefully we're coming out of this
Yeah.
as we head into the fall and winter. But where are you at now with how much wine you've produced or how much you're selling? What are some of the numbers you can share with us?
Yep. So last year, we were about we produced about a little over 2,000 gallons of wine, and we're probably on track to do a little over 2,500. I will say, when COVID kicked off, there was panic buying with some things to include alcohol, to include wine.
Oh yeah.
So we did for the first probably 3 or 4 months, probably the first 3 months, saw a huge spike, like triple. Um, almost threefold of what we saw the prior year. But again, like when COVID hit, we were only 7 months in, so we only had a couple months information. Um, so we did see a spike, and actually, like even during the summer of COVID of last year, it was pretty good. Uh, January, and I'll be honest, this January is pretty rough. Probably one of our roughest months because
Huh.
we were back to lockdown almost here. And it like people just didn't want to go out. They didn't want to experience anything. And it honestly, thankfully, February of this year into the summer, it progressed a lot. Um, but at the same time, it's funny because I've verified this with three other businesses. One is another winery as well. They were not seeing the same numbers that they saw, for example, this summer compared to last summer.
Huh.
So COVID was a very unique anomaly in that regard.
Yeah.
However, we're still seeing a progression for us. So we're still a positive net for us. I mean, and honestly, the trend for us is that September, basically up into the holidays, is kind of the busier months for us, and that's what we're actually that's what we started to see this weekend for Labor Day weekend. So hopefully we're on that projection. That's kind of been historical for us. But honestly, it probably won't be until next year when we start seeing somewhat of a normal projection for our numbers, because
Mhm.
it's been all over the place. And honestly, with the summer too, you go one extreme of being in quarantine, and then you go the other where people just want to travel. So honestly,
Yeah.
I had a lot of customers that tell me, oh, we were out for a couple of weeks at the beach or just visiting or going whatever. People
Yeah.
are leaving,
Oh
for
yeah.
good reason,
Travel was
because I
crazy
could
this
I could
summer.
yeah, exactly. I could understand that. So it's been a huge flux sometimes.
Mhm.
But looking into this, like I said, into this fall and winter, hopefully we're going, and we are projected, excuse me, to go to get a little bit busier. But it probably won't be until next year where we start seeing more of a solid, stable numbers. So
Awesome. Well, hey, we're getting close to the end of our time. Thinking back about when you first got out of the Army and you were working as a government contractor and even for as a couple of government jobs, you said it took you 6 years to discover that becoming an entrepreneur was what you really wanted to be. So if you're thinking about if you're talking to somebody that's getting out or just got out and they're looking to start their own business, get into entrepreneurship, what kind of advice would you have for them?
yeah. So I will say, it was a hard kind of decision for me because uh it you're going to the unknown, right? And there was a lot of self-reflection that I had to do to make sure that it was the right fit for me. Because it's one of those things, is like, well, if you fail, then the business fails. I guess I got to get another job. I you know, but there was definitely a lot of reflection, to see if that's truly what I wanted to do, or if it was just a hobby I wanted to just pursue at home in the garage or something. Um, so definitely just kind of laying the pros and cons, whether I wanted to pursue this as a mission of mine, or like I said, or just as a hobby. But just a lot of that self-reflection, and just to see if it was right for my family, and the support I got with my wife, because I mean, essentially me and her opened up together, that it kind of suited our goals, especially with our kind of main goal of associating ourselves and helping with the community here, whether
Mhm.
it be through partnerships or nonprofit partnerships, I mean, or just doing something, an event or sales or something. That was something that we had to really think about. But if you happen to have a hobby and you want to take it to a business, that's great. I think you just have to understand that, there is definitely a fine line between having a hobby and then making money for that hobby and turning it into a profession or business, because it's two separate things. Because owning and operating this winery, I'm putting 60, 80 hours a week. That's customer service, that's making the wine, bottling the wine, getting everything ready. So it's more of a hobby now, right? So I have to do all this stuff just to stay afloat.
Yeah.
So yeah, but yeah, like I said, just that self-reflection to see if it's right for you.
Yeah. So would you rather work 80 hours a week for yourself or 40 hours a week for someone else?
Yeah, no, somebody's asked me that before. I definitely like what I'm doing now.
I guess you're already doing it. So that
Yeah,
is easy, right?
yeah. Even for all the craziness that's going on, I still have time to plan for what I want to do when I want to do it. I just got to put it on the calendar now. That's all.
Awesome. All right. Well, hey, Andrew, thanks for sharing your entrepreneurial story. We look forward to getting out of this whole COVID thing and seeing what your micro winery, Woodlawn Press Winery, is going to do in a normal economy.
Awesome. Appreciate it. Thank you so much.
All right. These two veterans are Oscar Mike.